Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, did you want to?
Sorry, I'll let you.
Next time.
I'm in love with you.
Snap out of it.
I'll have what she's having.
Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm gonna make them alive. I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind. Don't assign me yours.
Caustic wit is my religion.
I would make a great queen because I am so stubborn.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we talk about all sorts of interesting things, including film and stupid people in film, and it's a lot of fun. I am Lauren Humphries Brooks. With me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Lauren.
And how are you?
I'm okay. I've had a headache for like 3 days because of all the pollen in the air. But other than that, I'm hanging in there. I'm doing okay.
Well, here in New York, we are having a heat wave, so that's exciting. I'm so happy that that's happening right now.
Just before I got on here, I was scrolling through Facebook, and my cousin who lives in Ohio, maybe, I can't remember, somewhere closer to you than to me, he was like, Alexa says it's 77 out, she's a lying whore.
I mean, granted, it's not too bad yet, at least not where I'm sitting. I haven't like hung out outside for an extended period of time, but it's supposed to hit 92 today, I think, which is quite warm for here and at this time of year particularly.
Especially because you guys get the humidity when it's warm, right?
Yeah, it's very humid right now, generally. Like, that's honestly the worst. If it were drier, I would have a better time of it, but otherwise you just kind of feel like lying around everywhere, but then you stick to your own furniture. So.
Yeah, it cracks me up when people here complain about the humidity, because I'm just like, clearly you've never lived anywhere else. Because it is not humid in California. I mean, compared to Arizona, sure, but yeah, if you've been to the south, if you've been to the east, it is very, very dry in California.
Oh God, I mean, the one of the worst. We're not going to talk about the weather the entire time, but
no, this is not a weather podcast. One
of the worst experiences of my life was heading down to Florida it was actually in June. It was late June, early July, so it was sort of the height of the summer, and it was, it was fine in New York. It was like in the 70s and 80s, pretty normal. And then the further south we got, the hotter it got, and the more humid it got. Like, we hit Georgia, and we were just like, why would anyone live here? Why? And by the time we got to Florida, just like, God has forsaken us. Like this. The best part is that I was visiting a friend of mine, with a couple of other friends who were doing a road trip. We got there, and she like came running out to say hello to us. She's like, "Hi guys, I'm so glad that you're here. The air conditioning's broken."
Oh no!
So we spent our first night in Florida actually sleeping out on deck chairs out by her pool, because it was so hot inside that we just could not stand it, even with all the fans going, everything. It was, so it was an experience, I must say. So yeah, Florida is forsaken by God. That's all I have to say about that.
Pretty much.
Moving on, we are actually going to talk about films today. And first of all, it is Pride Month, so we are very excited about this. We're going to talk about some of our favorite queer films, bearing in mind the fact that we are two cisgender straight white women. So, we basically,
I mean, is anybody really completely straight?
No one's completely straight. I think that everyone is on a sliding scale, basically. But if we identified, we would probably say heterosexual, I guess. I don't know. It's becoming more and more questionable as time goes on.
We don't need to get into that today.
But so bearing that in mind, that we're just sort of talking about some of the films that we like, and some of the films that are fairly important in film history and things like that. Just to kind of put a little disclaimer on that, we're not trying to say that this is the be all and end all of how we're defining queer cinema or queer theory. But first, we really wanted to talk about Cannes because they announced their main slate, their official slate, this week. And of course, there's some good things. You know, we've got Wes Anderson's new film. I don't know if this is good, but Paul Verhoeven's erotic nun story. I have no idea what that's going to be like, although I have a guess. So there's some interesting films that are going to be at Cannes. It's of course pretty exciting because obviously there wasn't the same thing last year, and it's kind of nice that, you know, this thing is actually getting going again. We're actually getting festivals again. We can get excited about new releases more, and you know, even though we're still in the midst of a pandemic, everybody, it is kind of nice to actually see that life continues to move ahead and we're beginning to get some of the things that we enjoy. Of course, Cannes also succeeded in once again tying its record for number of female directors. So, and I loved how some publications were framing this just like, Cannes has the most ever female directors it's ever had. It's just like, yeah, it's like tied itself for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
With 4. We've got 4 women, 4 female directors
In competition.
in competition, right? And I mean, come on, guys, come on. This is stupid. This is ridiculous. I mean, Cannes has a reputation now of being sort of the old guard.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of they're trying to be tastemakers. They're trying to be you know, they're trying to still kind of occupy this very elite position, and it's rapidly becoming clear that they're not particularly interesting anymore. A lot of the films that they're premiering now are very predictable. You know, Wes Anderson's new film, okay, sure, of course, why wouldn't you have that? It's very white, very predictable, very you know, I want to avoid saying the word elitist because I don't think that that's a helpful distinction, but there is something quite there's an in club going on here. There's an in group and an out group, and it definitely feels like that's what Cannes is doing yet again this year. 4 female directors, I mean, congratulations to them, but still 4 female directors is not enough. And the very idea that there are only 4 female directors that have made worthy films is bullshit. Like, that's just not true.
Yeah, it's that same but it reminds me of a couple years ago when I think it was the Venice Film Festival president was saying like, well, but we don't want to go to 50-50 because then that's unfair, because then we're just telling women like, oh, you're just here because we have to include you. And it's like, or you could just include half women because they make great movies too. Like, hello, you know, it's the same attitude. Like, well, there's only 4 women who directed films that deserve to be at this year's Cannes. You know, and if we did more than that, then it would really not be fair to them, because it would just be, you know, like patting them on the head. It's like, no, that's not true. I mean, we had,
well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, that there's this attitude just like, well, we don't want to pander. It's just like, well, no one's asking you to pander to anyone, but it is insane that you think that you cannot find more than 4 women, right?
Yeah.
In order, I don't believe them, in other words, because I've seen enough films, and I've also seen enough mediocre films directed by very beloved white men that I'm like, no, this, including ones that appeared at Cannes. I'm just like, no, this is not, like, you can definitely find more, and you can definitely make more of an effort to be more inclusive. And that's all that people are asking of these festivals. That's all that we really want to see, is more diversity. Like, stop showing us the same old people. And particularly, even, you know, and it's not taking away from the women who did get nominated. It's not taking away from any of the other films that are appearing in competition this year, to say that, like, you know, maybe there are other films that are just as worthy to be there and are not, you know, just directed by white people, just directed by white men. There's no reason to not make more of an effort than this, and they're obviously not. And I think that a lot of it is this old guard mentality. You know, the French generally, and Cannes in particular, have been very very old school.
Mhm.
And they're still acting like it's the 1960s, you know, and it wasn't cool in the 1960s. It's not cool now.
Right. Exactly.
So we did have a question. We had a couple of questions about Cannes actually, but I want to start with the one from Owen Daly. What is your favorite Palme d'Or winner that you've seen? And I actually had to go and look up because amazingly enough, I do not have a running tally of who's won the Palme d'Or.
What? You don't have
over
them
the
all
course.
memorized? I can't believe
I don't.
you.
But some interesting films have won the Palme d'Or. It was called the Grand Prix up until 1955, I think, and then it switched to the Palme d'Or. So we're going to count all of the films that won that kind of top award, basically, as part of that. But there are some really interesting films that won that award, including one of my favorite Clouseau films is The Wages of Fear in 1953. So this was a couple of years before it began to be called the Palme d'Or, it's about truck drivers who are trying to transport nitroglycerin over very rough roads. And what's wonderful about it is, of course, there's always that constant tension of, like, you know, if you hit a pothole, you might die. But of course, a whole bunch of different things happen over the course of the film that endanger them, and that also kind of reveal the stakes for these various men and how they're experiencing fear and how they're reacting to fear. Because it's as much about their own nerves and their personalities as it is about the fact that they're transporting nitroglycerin. So that's one of my favorites, definitely. Do you have like a major favorite?
Well, I mean, Parasite.
Parasite, I think it's a good answer.
And you know, I mean, that was what kickstarted its journey to Oscar, which is funny because a lot of movies that win, if you just go back in the last 20 years, most of the films that have won the Palme d'Or did not go on even to a Best Picture nomination, let alone to win. But yeah, that's such an amazing film. I love it so much. But then another one that I forgot, actually, another recent movie, but I forgot that it won the Palme d'Or, was I, Daniel Blake by Ken Loach, which is a really great film about just trying to navigate bureaucracy when you have been ill, and just trying, like, this, it's a guy who wants desperately to get back to work after he's had a heart attack, and he's just running into one obstacle after another because of the system. And then he meets a woman who's a single mom with a couple of kids, and they form this really sweet friendship, and they're trying to help each other out. And what I really love about that film is, first of all, that the two don't get together. It really truly is just a friendship. But also, like, there's that business from, I don't know, Florida or something this week that made the news for posting a sign that, well, since nobody, which I've seen similar things recently, but like, since nobody wants to work, they just want to stay at home and get handouts. We're short-staffed, and it's this attitude against government handouts. And I think that I, Daniel Blake is such a great story that really gets to the heart of, like, no, people want to work. They want to be able to support themselves. The government gets in its own way and gets in people's way by making things so difficult. So I think it's a great film. And I was very happy to remember that realize that it won the Palme d'Or a couple of years ago. So.
Reading through the list, the Palme d'Or has so many different, it's a weird award. Like, it's very difficult to predict who's going to win it, because if you look, and if you just go back through history, you've got, Hollywood films that are winning. You've got, like, in 1965, The Knack and How to Get It, which is a Richard Lester film. It's a good film, but it's a British sex comedy. Like, it's a very odd winner for that. And the year before that, it was The Umbrellas of Cherbourg by Jacques Demy. Later, Blow Up by Antonioni. MASH won in 1970. I love the ones that tied. Apocalypse Now and The Tin Drum tied in 1979. All That Jazz and Kagamusha tied in 1980, which I think is a great pairing. I want to see that in like a double feature. Let's just watch the Bob Fosse like death musical and Kurosawa's Kagamusha. Like, let's just do both of them at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great.
Farewell My Concubine tied with The Piano in 1993. There's some really interesting ones, but it's an odd award, and it is difficult to predict. And some of the more recent ones, I think, other than Parasite, are very more predictable, I guess. And not as good. I mean, Blue is the Warmest Color won in 2013. The Square won in 2017. Who cares?
The Tree of Life won.
Tree of Life,
yeah. That's another. Terrence Malick is another one that, and I think that he, even when the stories don't make any sense and the movies are kind of incoherent, he does make beautiful films. Like, they're gorgeous to look at. And he is definitely a favorite at Cannes. Like, they love Terrence Malick's films even when they're bad. Which I'm not saying Tree of Life is bad, but he's definitely one that they always want to show his stuff.
Yeah, they do. It's very that's where it becomes very predictable, those kinds of films.
Yeah, he's one that if he's got a movie, it's going to be a Cannes.
So it's not saying that Terrence Malick is a bad director or anything, but that it's like, of course you're going to show a Terrence Malick film. Regardless of its quality at the time. Tree of Life is one of those that I liked it the first time I saw it. I thought it was really fascinating and deep. And then seeing it a second and a third time, I was like, oh, this is actually really kind of rote and predictable. It's just sort of overwhelmed by the imagery. And I feel like the imagery makes it seem like it has greater depth than it actually does.
Yeah, which I think is pretty typical of Malick's films.
Yeah,
there are some exceptions.
A lot of his films are, I'm sorry, Malick fans, very superficial.
Well, we haven't gotten to those guys. We've just been on the Snyder and whatever, Nolan. So now it's time. It's Terrence Malick's turn.
I'm certain that someone is going to be like, "How dare you say these horrible things about Terrence Malick?"
I will say, I will say, last year, or not 2020, but 2019. I feel like 2020 is kind of a lost year, even though there were so many great films last year. But he had, oh my gosh, the title escapes me now, but it's the World War II Conscientious Objector film. Oh my gosh, I cannot think of the title. That one, it was like, I watched that, and I think if Jojo Rabbit hadn't been out at the same time, it probably would have gotten a little farther. It would have gotten more attention. Plus, it came out kind of late in the season. Oh my gosh, what is that movie called? A Hidden Life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought I watched that and I was like, man, this is the movie I've been waiting for him to make, where it was like this really beautiful story that makes sense, that follows a coherent narrative. Plus, it just has really, really fascinating cinematography. He used some similar stuff to what they did for The Favorite, with like not quite the fisheye lenses, but a similar look to that. And I don't know. So it just like, it was a interesting look and interesting craftsmanship, but also just this beautiful story. So yeah, I had been waiting for another movie like that for a really long time, because I really liked The New World, and I think The New World was the last Terrence Malick film that I liked until A Hidden Life came out.
I made a comment the other day in an argument about the Chloe Zhao argument to a guy who's arguing with me, and he was pointing out that she does say that she's influenced by Terrence Malick, and I absolutely agree with that. And I said something about how, well, but her films have greater depth. And so she may be influenced by him stylistically, but she obviously, gives greater depth to her characters and to her films and to the stories that she's telling using that style.
Because it's true.
Than he does. And this dude completely stopped talking to me. Like he did. I don't know if he muted me or what, but I was just like, I'm going to say that I won the argument.
Yep. That's what winning feels like.
So we do have another Cannes question from @Paula Fangirls. If you could go to Cannes, would you attend? And what is the film that when you look back at the history of films that premiered at Cannes, I cannot believe this premiered there. And she says for her that is Shrek 2, which is true. I actually had to go back and look for what films premiered at Cannes that were kind of weird. And there are definitely some odd ones. Cliffhanger from 1993 apparently
oh my gosh,
premiered
really?
Out of competition at Cannes. Yeah. And so it wasn't like this was in the running for the Palme d'Or or anything like that. But I think that is a very odd one. Cliffhanger is the 1993 Sylvester Stallone action movie, right? And it's completely over the top. It's a wild film, but it's a fine kind of extreme action movie, but I don't know how that wound up at Cannes. One of the other ones that I did not realize was Kung Fu Panda, which, again, it's kind of like a Shrek movie. So Shrek 2 premieres at Cannes. Okay, Kung Fu Panda. All right, sure, why not? Again, cute film. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't seem like it quite fits.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts about that, Karen? Because there's some odd ones.
The 1998 Godzilla.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
That's a choice.
That was a choice that someone made. Yeah. That's pretty funny. But yeah, I think the ones that you mentioned already, and definitely Shrek premiering there. It's very surprising.
I find it weird that a number of sequels premiered there. So Shrek 2 premiered at Cannes. X-Men: The Last Stand premiered at Cannes. Star Wars Episode 3. Revenge of the Sith. It was at Cannes. I'm like, it's not necessarily a value judgment on the films, but they just do not fit.
It's like you've got all these beautiful artistic movies, and then you've got X-Men: The Last Stand. What?
So once again, I would like to say that Cannes can definitely find more than 4 female directors. If you can premiere Shrek 2, you can definitely find more female directors. I am positive of this.
Exactly. I will say though, didn't Kung Fu Panda have a female director?
Did it? I honestly don't know. Well, good. Hurrah. Good job, Ken.
I know the second one did. Oh no, the first one did not, of course. Oh well.
And so the other part of Paula's question is, if you could go to Cannes, would you attend? Not this year.
Not this year, no.
If I had, honestly, in some ways, I would like to go not being press. If I was just able to go and attend a few films, I think that Cannes sounds like a weird trip. That's all I have to say. It seems like there's a lot of requirements of it, and there's a lot of posturing and things like that. But just to be able to go and to see some movies and to see the area, be in that part of France, I think would be a lot of fun. But the more that I've learned about Cannes, the less I've wanted to actually attend.
Yeah, I definitely want to go. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, as far as going for work, going as working press, I would be a little terrified because I don't want to be yelled at for not wearing the right shoes on the red carpet or something like that. And you hear all those stories and it's just like, I don't, that's too much stress. You're already stressed because you're at a film festival and you're not sleeping enough and you're running around, you're trying to get all this work done, but then to also have to be worrying every minute that you're not putting on the right, appearances or whatever, that's just, that's too much. I like Sundance where I can just be in my coat and my jeans and my 18 layers of clothes and my boots and not worry about it.
I mean, some of it gives me a flashback to, when I was in middle school or something like that, and we had to dress up to go to career day or whatever, and I had a fight with the principal. Actually, my parents had a fight with the principal, who very much expected...
You fighting with authority? I'm shocked.
My parents fighting with authority, who very much expected me. I was a girl. I hated wearing dresses. I'm still not a big fan of dresses, and I wanted to wear slacks, and not like ripped jeans or tank tops, which by the way is what I wear to work now. Mm-hmm. But I was supposed to wear a dress. I wanted to wear slacks, and the principal was like, "No, girls wear skirts." It's just like, no, they don't. This is 2000. Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. But so the can thing gives me that vibe. I do not like people dictating what I'm supposed to wear, especially if I'm going to someplace I'm supposed to be working.
Exactly.
It's like, no, I'm here to watch a movie. I'm not here to figure out what your stupid dress code is.
Exactly.
Anyways, so yeah.
But yes, I would love to go as just a person and enjoy it.
I think that going as a person versus going as an actual critic would be a lot more fun, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on with Cannes this year. We'll be interested to see how all of that plays out. Although honestly, I'm more interested in some of the other film festivals that are announcing their slates, have already announced their slates, etc. So before we get into queer films, I wanted to talk about The Conjuring 3. Really briefly. We don't have to do a review or anything. It came out on HBO Max yesterday. It's now been released in theaters. I got to watch it last night. It's a lot of fun. I had a good time with it, but I like pretty much every single one of the Conjuring films, including The Nun. So take that as you will. But one of the things that honestly drove me crazy was that I saw a number of people complaining about the content of the film in terms of religion. And first of all, I was like, have you not seen any Conjuring films? Because this is a thing that runs throughout all of them. You like the entire thing that there is a film called The Nun.
Right. Well, and in the first movie, they make the huge point about how Ed Warren was like the only layman that was authorized by the Catholic Church to perform exorcisms.
Yeah, like the question of faith and the issues of faith run throughout the Conjuring film. So you don't have to like that necessarily, but that is simply a part of that universe, right? Mm-hmm. But what I found really weird about the reactions here is that people were complaining about the use of Catholicism, about the use of like the iconography and the lore, the church lore, and all of this stuff. And I'm sitting there going like, the film is called The Devil Made Me Do It. It is literally a film about exorcism. Like that is the topic. Mm-hmm. And finally, have you never watched a horror movie ever? Because 3/4 of horror films, Catholicism in particular, is a major source for horror. It has been, I hate to say, it has been since like the 17th century. Mm-hmm. And now again, you don't have to necessarily like that aspect of horror, but it is a major integral part of horror.
Well, especially when we're talking about, paranormal stories. Yeah.
Exorcism, ghosts, demons, all of that stuff, the whole, that's poltergeist, a lot of it, at some point you get some sort of religion that is coming into play, and very often it is Catholicism. And I think that some of that, there's a whole history of kind of a weird relationship between Catholicism and the supernatural. But I think that some of it is simply the use of ritual, right? Catholicism, unlike a lot of other religions, particularly unlike a lot of other Christian religions, is very ritualistic. There's a heavier divide between between good and evil. There is a lot of lore that is attached to that, and so of course it's fairly natural that that films that are dealing with the supernatural, as we say, are going to use Catholicism as kind of the starting point. So I don't know. I just found it very weird that people were complaining about this specific film, and it is very heavy on the use of Catholicism and the use of the rituals and the concepts and the ideas of faith and things like that. But I'm sorry, you've got heroes that are running around wearing crucifixes and that are using the Lord's Prayer to eject demons from bodies. I don't know exactly what you expect from this genre.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and just say right now that if folks are interested in watching the movie and they haven't yet and they don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead like 2 or 3 minutes, because I'm going to say some things that are spoilery. So this is your last warning. But one of the things that I was starting to talk to you about before we started recording was that I feel like the religious elements of the Conjuring 3 are what make the story work, because so many of these movies, like we were talking about Exorcist, even the first 2 Conjuring films, it's like these demons just kind of appear out of nowhere and just start tormenting people for no particular reason, just proximity or whatever. And one of the things that is an underlying element in, outside of films, but in just like kind of the real world, when people talk about demons and possession and stuff like that, there's always this idea that entity has been invited. And most films that deal with exorcism skip out on that part. They don't get into that spirit or whatever being invited. It's just kind of there. And for The Conjuring 3, I think that it really works because the whole point of the movie and the whole inciting incident of the movie is the fact that this is a demon that's been summoned for a particular reason. And I feel like that actually makes this story work in some ways. I don't think that this is as strong of a movie as the first 2 Conjuring films, but I think that in some ways that makes this story a little bit more complete than the other 2.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. The one issue that I had, and maybe I missed it, was that it didn't really give motivation for the initial summoning of the demon.
I felt like it did.
Well, maybe we could talk about that off air, because I was confused. At a certain point, I was like, why?
I didn't think it was a very strong motivation, but it does get into it.
Like, why is this demon being summoned in the first place? And that was one of the questions that I had about the movie. But yeah, it's actually kind of nice to see, okay, this is, because it's about human agency. And I think that that's some of the things like The Exorcist is more about targeting innocence, right? Mm-hmm. But it's absolute evil, right? Yeah. So I don't even remember if there is much of an explanation as to why the demon inhabits Regan, other than the fact that she's innocent, and they're Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
Don't be Catholic really... if you don't want to be possessed by demons. Just don't be Catholic. I mean, that's like, let's face it. But other than that, I don't think that there's much of an explanation as to why the demon chooses her over anybody else, right? But which does kind of invoke the sort of the pointlessness of evil to a certain degree.
Right.
But it also means that there's no real culpability, right? There's no human agency that is making choices that are resulting in this. And I do kind of like, I agree with you. I like the fact that in The Conjuring 3, there is a human agency at work. There's a reason behind this happening. It isn't just this demon got bored in hell one day and decided to target a kid,
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things when it comes to supernatural, like for me with horror, I tend to prefer like killers, slasher movies where there's a killer coming after somebody, than like monster movies or supernatural. I enjoy some of the supernatural horror and I'm getting more into it, but one of the big reasons that I don't tend to prefer it is because how do you stop how do you stop something that you can't see, doesn't have a physical form, you know, like it's, I what I like about horror is when there's something that can be stopped. And so I felt like with the Conjuring 3 introducing that element, like there's a tangible, actual physical person that you can go after, that you can put a stop to what they're doing, rather than just, you know, praying a lot and hoping that it works.
Well, and in some ways, actually, all of the Conjuring universe films they're fairly comforting films to a certain degree, because there is this closed moral universe that they construct. Almost always, it isn't just, you know, there is a human agency involved, or there is a rule that can be, that can fix the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even in something like Annabelle Comes Home, which I love, I think it's great. I want to watch it again. Where it's just, it's kind of stupidity and non-belief and things like that. But you get this huge eruption of all of these supernatural things, but eventually it can be contained and controlled, right? And I like that about the films. I don't necessarily want that in every single one of my horror films, but I like the fact that I can go into one of these Conjuring films and just be like, you know what, it's all, bad shit is going to happen, but it's all going to turn out okay in the end. And I like that. I like being able to go into a horror film and know that there is going to be a resolution to it. Mm-hmm. And that then, you know, we're going to put Annabelle back in the case. We're going to, you know, put the goblet back on the table, and it could come back in another movie, but for now it's over, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I quite like that. So yeah, I did recommend The Conjuring 3. I really liked it. I had a good time with it. You know, it was a good kind of Friday night movie, and I kind of wish I'd been able to see it in a theater. Not quite comfortable going to a theater yet, but one of the reasons for this is that it is a fairly dark movie. So just in terms of lighting.
Yeah.
So there are places where I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. So I did go see it in a theater because I didn't want to watch it in my house, which may or may not be haunted. And it's, you know, I'm kind of weird like that. Like I'll watch the other Conjuring movies because I've seen them. I'll watch those in my house, but not ones that I haven't seen. I don't know. It just makes me feel weird. But
it is haunted, Karen. It is.
I'm pretty sure it is. But that's a whole other story for a whole other day. So I went and saw it yesterday in a theater, which the theaters right now are still, I think 40% capacity is the max. So it's like I was in a technically full theater, but there's nobody sitting next to me for like 5 seats. It was great. But they were showing the trailers before, and they showed a trailer for The Conjuring 3, and I was like, did I go into the wrong theater? Like I thought that for a second. And then a guy in front of me got up and went and checked, and he comes back and he's telling whoever he's with, he's like, no, this is the right one. It was just so funny. It's like, wow. They also showed the trailer for A Quiet Place 2, which has already been out for a week or so. And so I was just like, oh, that's kind of funny, but I've never actually seen a trailer for the movie I'm about to watch while I'm seated for the movie.
I think that all the theaters right now are just like, what is happening?
We
forgot how to theater.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. It was great.
Oh boy. So just get to the movie. Don't show the trailers.
Right.
Just get to it.
Yep. Exactly.
Interesting.
Anyway.
So let us talk for a little while. We've spent a lot of time on other things, but let's talk for a little while about queer cinema, queer films. This is a huge spectrum of films. We could talk about mainstream movies that have queer subtexts. Obviously, for a large portion of Hollywood history, and even for the history of a lot of other world cinemas, you really couldn't show or depict queerness explicitly, right? Mm-hmm. You couldn't show women falling in love with other women. You couldn't show men falling in love with other men. You couldn't show a combination of genders or anything that really smacked of non-binary. So it's been a process, and it has taken a long time. And then for a very long time, the only way to depict queer characters was as villains, or as somehow sick or twisted and and things like that. So a lot of it's one of the interesting elements of what is usually referred to as queer horror, that there are a lot of queer characters that are queer coded throughout cinematic history, but they're very often using queerness as an indicator of perversity or evil. And on the one hand, this can be really interesting because you're essentially taking something that's been subsumed by the society, has been controlled by the society, and is coming out in monstrous ways. But on the other hand, you're also vilifying queerness generally as something that's evil or perverted or wrong at some level, dangerous. So there's a lot of interesting things, a lot of pushing and pulling, I think, that has gone on over the course of queer cinema. But let's start with one of the questions that we got, again from at Owen Daly. What are some great queer-coded films from the golden age of cinema you'd recommend? So I have a few. Do you have any thoughts on this, Karen? It's kind of a weird thing because it is all queer-coded. It's all subtext. Like, there's very few places where they're actually like, hey, we actually have a gay character or a non-binary character.
Why don't you go first on this one?
All right, the first one that I wanted to mention, I have actually mentioned this before because I'm not certain whether it's intentional, but it feels intentional, is Vera Cruz, which is a 1954 Western starring Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster that is absolutely 100% the romance between Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster. There is a woman involved at some point. It does not matter. She does not count. This is about the two of them. And it is an incredibly queer Western. I was shocked, actually, by how queer it is. And again, I'm not saying that Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster make out or have sex or anything like that, but there's an entire scene in which they're comparing the size of their guns and how well they shoot and how many targets they can hit at the same time. A lot of it is about the interaction between the two of them and about this kind of love-hate relationship that they set up and how much they care about each other and how much they hate each other at the same time. It is like, it's difficult to kind of put into context how queer this movie is. Because when I started watching, it's like, oh, it's a Western, it's 1954 Western, it's good actors, it's kind of on that cusp of the Western where things are getting a little bit more loose in Hollywood. You're able to show more violence, you're able to show more sexuality, particularly within the context of something like a Western. But I was surprised by how far they actually went in depicting the most important relationship between these two men and their feelings about each other and, their need to show one another that they are, powerful, that they're manly, all of this stuff. And at one point, I'm not kidding, there's a scene between the two of them where I was just like, if they do not kiss at the end of this scene, then we have been robbed. Like, this is a romance, basically. So yeah, I recommend that one. Vera Cruz from 1954. Another
I
one,
really don't have any from like the golden age, like nothing. It's because of my lack of knowledge, not because they don't exist.
I think that it's difficult because, again, you're often talking about coding, you're talking about interpretation. I saw someone tried to argue that Double Indemnity is a queer film, which I just don't buy, that there's an implication of queerness between the Edward G. Robinson character and Fred McMurray, and it just doesn't work in the context of that film. But I think that there are definitely some films where it does. You're always having to deal with subtext when it comes to these movies. So I think in some ways, just looking at films as queer can sometimes change the way that you are watching the film. Very often when we talk about queer cinema, particularly in this period, we're talking about camp. Right? So a lot of the Douglas Sirk films, even though they are often about heterosexual relationships, have a queerness to them. So Magnificent Obsession, the Wind movie, and now I can't recall the title of it. It's with Lauren Bacall. you know, and pretty much anything with Rock Hudson is just like, there is something queer going on here. Giant, you know, let's talk about Giant and Rock Hudson and James Dean. Rebel Without a Cause is definitely a queer-coded film. One of the others that I wanted to mention, and I don't know whether it necessarily counts as golden age, because it's 1961 and it's produced by American International Pictures, which is like the Roger Corman kind of films. But it's Master of the World, starring Vincent Price and Charles Bronson. And again, it's one of those that I went into being like, Price is always a little camp. Price is always a little like a little queer-coded. Like that's the best way to put it. And Price himself was bisexual. So, and he plays that up, I think. He plays up that queerness, the sort of way in which he doesn't quite occupy the position of the manly hero, but he's also not he's not particularly being the evil villain necessarily. But Master of the World is essentially Vincent Price and his flying gay airship. And I'm not even kidding about that, because his airship is, he's this guy who's attempting to stop all war by threatening to bomb everybody with his gigantic airship. And he has created this like utopia in the sky that is entirely filled with men. It is nothing but men, shirtless sailors. And again, it's like, we cannot not read this as queer necessarily. I don't know how to read this any other way. It is a hilarious film. It's very much, Vincent Price is like enjoying the heck out of it. But a lot of it really is about this like battle between this guy who's actually trying to do something good. He's trying to stop all war. The way he's trying to stop all war is by threatening to release weapons on all the different countries unless they stop fighting. So it's this weird thing, but at the same time, he's got all of these, you know, shirtless men who are surrounding him. And it's one of the most incredibly camp films I have seen. So awesome. Master of the World, 1961, technically based on a Jules Verne novel, a couple of Jules Verne novels, but not really. So let's just kind of open it up for a little while. What are some of your favorite like queer-coded, explicitly queer films? We can actually talk about, you know, explicitness. One
of mine, it's a fairly recent film, that's Tangerine by Sean Baker, I think. Have you seen that one?
I haven't, but I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah, it's funny because the first time I watched it, I was so much more caught up in like, because basically I need to look it up because I want to get the names of the performers correct, but it's basically these women that are running around. It's in the course of like one night. It's like, I think it's New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve or something, and it's sex workers, and a couple, you know, they're friends, and one of them is looking for her pimp. I can't remember why. It's been a while since I've seen it, but basically it's a lot of just like going from place to place looking for this guy, and there's a lot of just like walking into places and yelling, and just like the first time I watched the movie, I was more caught up in like, oh, this is just LA on a Tuesday, like just people walking into businesses and just yelling. And it was just like, it was a little too much to read. But I've watched it a couple of times, and it's actually just this really, it's definitely not like a movie that I would say is a happy movie, but it's very good because it really gives you this look into the experience of trans women, of sex workers, and how they're treated, how they're looked at, how they're exploited, and but also the humanity in them. and that they're people that have feelings and hopes and fears, and it's all of those things put in together. And it's a really good film. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I highly recommend it. In fact, I'm gonna look and see. I know it was on Netflix for a while. I'm not sure if it still is, but that's definitely one that that you should watch. It's funny because let's see. Oh, it's on Hoopla and Canopy, so you can check it out on either of those. But it's, yeah, whenever people make a big deal about like, oh, Steven Soderbergh made an entire movie on an iPhone, it's like, yeah, Sean Baker beat him to that with Tangerine. Like, he already did that. So, and Sean Baker, of course, is the director who also did the Florida Project. So. Very different movie, but one of the things that I think is so great about what he does with film is that he just has this gift for really getting into the heart and humanity of people that society tends to overlook and not think two thoughts about. And that's what he does with Tangerine. So
fairly early on too. I mean, I think that now, particularly in the past couple of years, we've been talking more about trans rights and the inclusion of trans people in the community generally, and actually recognizing them as people because they are people.
Well, and actually casting trans actors to play these parts too, because that's another important thing. There's been a lot, I mean, going back to the 60s and 70s, there have been trans characters in movies that were played by cisgendered people, and getting the opportunity for trans actors to be part of telling their own stories is really important.
And it's finally happening. We're finally actually getting to that point, which is why we're having also so much reactionism that's happening in the world at large. But it's, at that, it's a good thing. We're actually moving forward. Well, in terms of that, it's interesting because two of my favorite films, and I know that there are a lot of questions about these films and that there are a lot of different feelings about them, but I do love Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything.
Yes.
And the original that it's based on, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Now, of course, in both of those films, you've got straight cisgender actors playing drag queens, right? And in the case of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, you actually have Terrence Stamp playing a transgender woman. But both of those films, and they're very, one of the things I like about them is that even though Tu Wong Fu is a remake, technically, it does something completely different with the concept. And so you can watch both films really easily and not feel like you're repeating anything.
Yeah.
It's basically three drag queens go on the road, and it's a lot of fun. But I like the fact that both of those are the first films that I remember that really, them in the Birdcage, really.
Yeah.
That really represented, again, drag queens, not just, they're funny, they're entertaining, all of that, but not just as humorous. Or as like almost something to look at but not to understand. They actually treated these characters as characters, and as people who are in danger when they go to certain areas of the country, that are in danger when they stop in this rundown town, and at the same time, you also do have that humor. You have this whole, I like in Tu Wong Fu the fact that there's this community that embraces them, and you never quite know. You're like, some of them definitely know that these are drag queens, right? But some others obviously just have no inkling of the fact that they're talking to drag queens at all. And one of the things that I really like is there's a scene nearing the end of Tu Wong Fu between Patrick Swayze and Stockard Channing, who've developed this beautiful friendship throughout the film. And it's at the point at which she acknowledges that she knows, right? She knows that he's a man, right? And that she is essentially saying, like, I'm not bothered by that. And that's, you know, I know that that's like, well, it's small steps and everything, but it's good to actually see that on screen and to see that embraced, to be like that this isn't just about humor, this also isn't about pain and suffering, this is about joy.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on this one too, but the Birdcage similarly, I mean, it's really funny, and it's a movie that is intended to be very funny, but it also does have some tender moments, like especially for the Nathan Lane character, where he's used to sorry, I'm trying to think, like, what is the proper pronouns there? I guess she, like,
she,
the character, the character
identifies as she,
and so, you know, she has these moments where she's just like, you know, there's a great conversation between Nathan Lane and Robin Williams, when Robin Williams is trying to get rid of her for this visit from his future in-laws, and it's funny at first, but then you realize that she gets it, and she gets that she's being dealt with instead of getting to be part of this family that she's always been part of. And it's really sweet. Yeah.
She raised their child.
Yeah.
I mean, she's his mother, right? And there's that, and that runs throughout the entire film, where part of the pain that she's going through is the fact that her son is essentially saying, like, I'm embarrassed by you, or I'm rejecting you because my future in-laws are bigots, right? And are not going to understand, or something like that. And that is part of that kind of pain. So yeah, you have this character that is very funny and tries so hard to sort of fit in or whatever, to become what her family is expecting her to be, or wants her to be for this one moment, and then finally is like, you know, this is not who she is. It can't be, you know.
Right.
They are finally the ones who have to understand that, because they love her.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I love The Birdcage too. Again, it's also one of those times where the first sorts of films that we actually saw that depicted non-heteronormative lifestyles that were more in the mainstream. A lot of these films are still mainstream. You've got Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, Gene Hackman. You have Patrick Swayze and Wesley Snipes, who have the biggest shoulders in the world.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, so those kinds of films are great, and they do have problematic elements, and I think that that's something that should always be acknowledged. And we should also acknowledge that they did also represent steps forward.
Exactly.
Especially in terms of cinema.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's not to excuse, but you have to look at you know, at the time that a movie like To Wong Fu came out, you know, it really, and even now this is still a problem, but it's like when a studio releases a movie like that, they want big names attached to it. And, you know, especially in the 90s, there weren't big names that were known drag queens. So it's like, what are, you know, and it's not excusing that, but yeah, you know what I mean? Things are getting better, but you have to have those steps along the way to get there.
And two other films that I wanted to mention really quickly, because they're both right now available on Criterion Channel, and I really recommend that people go watch them, are Jacqueline Audrey's Olivia, and which is I've talked about it before on this podcast. I also reviewed it. It is it's a early French film from it's a French film from the 1950s that is about a girls' school, and is specifically about the kind of developing relationship between the head mistress of the girls' school and one of her students. And it's a really, again, interesting film, and a very major step forward in terms of the cinematic representation of lesbians. The other film is Mädchen in Uniform, which is a German film from, I believe, the 1930s, which is actually a similar plot. It's about a young girl who goes to a boarding school and develops a crush on a teacher. And again, it isn't just about that, but both of these films actually, deal with lesbian attraction, with the attraction between, and also some of the issues that are a part of that. So both of these stories are about young girls, right, teenage girls falling in love with older teachers and how that is dealt with. Both of them are, I highly recommend, and both of them right now are available on Criterion.
Cool. I wanted to mention a couple of documentaries. And the first one is Paris is Burning.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking slowly because I'm trying to look up if it's available. It's still available on the Criterion channel. Great film from, I think, when is that from? Like 1990-ish, I think. Somewhere around there, yeah. And it's a documentary about drag queens in New York City, and it's about these elaborate balls that they have. That's a great one. You've seen that one too?
Yeah, Paris is Burning, yes.
Yeah, so definitely one to watch. Another one that is on Netflix is called A Secret Love, and it's a really sweet documentary about this couple, Terry Donahue and Pat Henschel. I had to look it up. And it's basically, they're old now, and they've been living in this relationship for decades, but they were living in secret. One of them, I mean, we've seen like movies about this too, but this is a documentary about a particular couple where they weren't out to, I think just to one of their families. I'm trying to remember. But someone who had been a professional baseball player, and she kept it secret from her family forever. They did not know who this woman was. Like, that they just thought they were friends. And so it's eventually, like, as they're getting old and they need to worry about, taking care of each other in their old age and what's going to happen to them, and they're dealing with illnesses and things, eventually it's, they're coming out to the family. And so it's one of those that it's really sweet, actually. It's sad that they had to spend so many decades hiding who they were and what their relationship was, but the watching what unfolds as they talk to the family is really, really great. And then the other one just came out last year, and that's Welcome to Chechnya. Did you see that one?
I haven't seen that one, no.
It's on HBO. And this one is harrowing because it's essentially about people who are living in Chechnya who are they're part of the LGBTQ plus community. So you've got gay people, you've got trans folks who have to get out because they will be executed. They can be executed, or at the very least imprisoned, for their sexuality and their gender identity. And so it's about this group that they basically extract people, they get them out of the situation, and take them safely across the border, and then help get them placed as refugees and political asylum seekers in other parts of the world. And so it's about the people that are doing that work. It's about the people that some of the people that they have rescued and what they have to do to be able to accomplish that. And they use this really fascinating, like some Hollywood studio films could take a page out of their work, their book, because they use this deep fake technology to change people's faces. And at first you don't even realize, like, wow, this seems kind of dangerous for them to be showing their faces on camera. And then at some point you realize, like, oh wait, that's not really them. It's they've kind of swapped out faces. It's really fascinating the way they did that. But yeah, so 3 really great documentaries.
Cool. I think I remember you talking about the last one. Maybe a couple of weeks ago or something like that. Yeah, those all sound. Paris is Burning is great.
So good.
the other two sound really interesting. The one documentary that I would like to mention, and then we'll kind of close everything out, is Circus of Books from 2019, which is a documentary that's available on Netflix and is directed by Rachel Mason. And it actually chronicles the story of a gay pornography bookstore that in West Hollywood that became kind of a site for cruising, for the gay community, etc. And one of the interesting things about this film is that it's directed by Rachel Mason. It's about her parents. Her parents are the ones who own the bookstore, and they're this adorable little Jewish couple that are just like, they're the last people in the world that you're like, they own a gay pornography store. But and one of the wonderful things about it is that they're very sweet. They're very like, they marched in some of the gay pride parades. They kind of formed the nucleus of the gay community. And partially because, and I think one of the things that a number of the people that are interviewed in the documentary talk about is the fact that they were essentially good parent stand-ins, that you have a community, particularly in the 1980s, many of whom have been rejected by their families. And you also have the AIDS crisis going on at the same time. And they have this little place that they can go to that is this mom and pop store, basically, and to feel comfortable and to feel safe. And it's a lovely little film. It's sad because the store, the entire structure is that the store is going out of business because it's just no longer doing the business that it needs to. But it is also just very entertaining to see these little old people going to, like sex toy conventions and buying, being like, oh, finding boxes of DVDs and be like, oh, I remember this. He was a big star back in those days. And it's like, it's all gay pornography. But they, knew their business really well. It's a very sweet film. It's very touching.
Awesome. I have not seen it. I will watch it.
So yeah, that's on Netflix. So we have one more question that I think is really good to close things out on, which is again from Owen Daly. What celebrity from the queer community would you most want to see a biopic of that we have not gotten yet? And he suggests William Haynes. My suggestion is Dorothy Arzner.
Yes, I second that.
Because Dorothy Arzner, who was not the only female filmmaker working in the 1930s, please don't say that. She was the only female filmmaker who was working in the studio system.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely accurate. But she was a lesbian. She was a fairly out lesbian. She didn't conceal it particularly, as much as you can be out in the 1930s in Hollywood. And she was a fantastic director, obviously, made some really interesting films, and had a long-term relationship with another woman, and was remarkable in a lot of ways just for being able to continue to carve out this part of Hollywood for herself that finally ended, and she essentially lost her career by the time the production code really came in full force. But she's a fascinating figure, and definitely one that deserves she's been getting more attention over the past few years, but she deserves more. She really deserves to have the accolades that she has been denied up until this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think that there's a more appropriate selection than her, so I co-sign.
All right, so I think that is going to close us out for this episode.
I just wanted to say Jennifer's Body is now on Hulu, so go watch it.
Yes. No excuses. I rented that movie. I finally got to the point where I was like, I still haven't seen this and I need to see it, so I'm just going to rent it. But now it's on Hulu, so everybody should watch it.
Yes.
So I think that is going to close us out for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Also, go watch movies.
Watch a lot of movies.
Thank you so much for listening. And as always, we are very grateful to our patrons, who include Adriana, Ali, Heather, James, Kathleen Carriata, Mason, Matt, Matthew, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Robert, Steve, Sharon, Tao, and Will. Thank you so much, guys. And you do have a new bonus episode that is up. Let us know if you're able to listen to that, if there are any issues with it. And, you know, speaking of Pride Month, it is about Almodovar's Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. So it fits in really well. In addition to that, we hope to be bringing more bonus content before long, and we're trying to get some other things going now that we're both sort of more settled. I hopefully will be able to do some of that. If you do want to join our Patreon, that's patreon.com/citizendame, and you help us to keep the lights on, to keep things paid up, and keep us going. And it's really nice, and you get some fun stuff in addition. If you want to get anything from our Zazzle store, that is zazzle.com/citizendamepod. We do have masks, as you should still be wearing them, even though we get to take them off every once in a while now. We also have a Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame, where you can just toss us a couple of dollars if you feel like it without making the Patreon commitment. We have our website. Website is citizendamepod.com, where I will be putting up some reviews of some Blu-rays before long. And I think that Karen has 1 or 2 reviews coming up, and I'm covering Tribeca for us. I think that you're also going to be doing some Tribeca reviews.
Yep, exactly.
So that will be fun. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at citizendamepod@gmail.com, and just be nice. Otherwise, we're just going to ignore you.
Yep, pretty much.
We do have a Letterboxd, although I'm not certain what we've done with that so far. We're going to try to do more with it, I promise. That's
we're working on it.
At Citizen Dame. And of course, you can get in touch with us via Twitter or Instagram at Citizen Dame Pod. And you can get in touch with us individually in a number of different places. Karen, where are you?
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at LH Business. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
What the hell? Carol-Ann? No. I'm sorry, but I cannot take this anymore. Noxie, could you take care of this, Carol-Ann? Virgil and I have something we must discuss. So, Virgil, I gather you like hitting ladies.
Some ladies need to get hit.
Then, conversely, some men need to be hit back.
I know Virgil's gonna hurt me so bad. Caroline, there's something you should know about Vita, Mommy. Well,
Vita works out. Vita works out.
a lot.